This is the Miller philosopher. In the last video, I touched on how Balin's dream of retaking Khazad dûm didn't die with him, and that it was fulfilled centuries later in the Fourth Age, the year 171 to be exact. But Tolkien barely gives us any details about that, just a line or two. But I think when you look at the history of the dwarves and the wars of the Third Age and the political landscape to the Fourth Age, you can more or less kind of reconstruct what I consider at least was the final and forgotten war in a series of wars for Khazad dûm. Initially falling in 1980 of the Third Age because the dwarves had awoken the Balrog that had snuck in there somehow without being noticed, the dwarves were forced to abandon their oldest and greatest home, and from that moment on, the cycle of wars begins. The first was obvious, because Tolkien directly refers to it as such, the War of Dwarves and Orcs, which was from 2793 to 2799 of the Third Age. And this resulted in the extermination of every orc across the Misty Mountains after all the dwarves of Middle-earth united into one army to avenge the death of Thor, the descendant of Durin. However, the victors did not nor could not enter their long-abandoned halls because, as Dane attested to, the Balrog, now named Durin's Bane, was still there. The fact that he had seen it meant that the final battle of Azanubazar had probably woken up again. But Durin's Bane was hiding, trying to avoid the attention of greater powers, and thus did not go outside to lay waste to the already weakened and exhausted Dwarven army. The dwarves had won the war, but not their home. The next war, as I said in the previous video, was Balin's expedition when it went back to retake Khazad dûm, now named Moria, in the year 2989. As I stated before, I believe that their logic made sense. The Balrog had not been seen in centuries, the orcs were dead or scattered as they believed, and therefore there was logical cause to believe that the ancient evil was dead or gone, similar to circumstances what happened with the quest for Erebor. But when they arrived, they found more orcs had crept back into the Misty Mountains and into Khazad dûm. So Balin's forces fought another series of battles once again to evict these new orcs, which resulted in a second cleansing of Khazad dûm. But this was only temporary, as 4 years after their initial success, reinforcements arrived. Another series of brutal battles follows under the mountain, but this time the orcs were able to overrun the Dwarven colony and exterminate it. Thanks to the survival of the Fellowship of the Ring after their adventures through the long-dead realm, it was now confirmed that the orcs had retaken Khazad dûm, but at the very least, Durin's Bane was no more. And this was why I consider this a second war, because of the series of extreme battles that resulted in a conclusive result. Now, by the Fourth Age, everything has completely changed. Sauron is gone, the Balrog is dead, the Fellowship is past into legend, the west of Middle-earth is now prospering, and the dwarves had rebuilt their strength. Enter Durin VII, the most recent heir of Durin's line, believed by the dwarves to be the reincarnation of the first Durin himself. Like Balin before him, he starts to look towards Khazad dûm, because, again, the loss of Khazad dûm was an itch the dwarves never let go of. And decides now is the time to retake the ancient home from the hands of their enemy. I also think this would have been done out of vengeance as well, since the dwarves were now well aware of what happened to Balin's expedition now centuries before. And history has shown over and over that no race holds as hot a temper or as long a grudge as a dwarf, especially when insulted. Now, this is speculation because, again, Tolkien doesn't give details, but I am going to go off the established precedent for the dwarves that Tolkien gives in Legendarium. Durin VII would have repeated what happened in the First War, a call to arms of all the Dwarven realms of Middle-earth. So, unlike Balin's expedition, which had been smaller compared to the many orcs that returned to retake Khazad dûm from them, This would have been a full-scale military campaign with thousands upon thousands of dwarves. And since the dwarves believed that Durin reincarnated and that Durin VII was the latest in this line anyways, it's very likely that they probably would have answered the call, even the mysterious dwarf clans of the east. I think Durin would have learned his lessons from history, and that the advantage that the orcs always had over the other races was their numbers. That he would need more than just the stubbornness of dwarves and their legendary gears of war to retake and hold Khazad dûm. And while this may not be something that they would have advertised per se, I do think that the recent history of fighting alongside other races has somewhat softened their view towards outsiders, so to speak. Because the people of Dale for certain would have known what was going on, seeing a massive army marching into and out of Erebor armed for war. And that the United Kingdom would have also known about this and would have liked to know why there's a huge-ass dwarf army marching southwest across Middle-earth. I mean, yeah, they're not orcs, but people would still get nervous. So, I think that Durin would have sent a raven and word ahead to the United Kingdom, informing them of what their intentions are so that there's no confusion or misunderstanding, or that whoever the High King was at that time would send an emissary to the Dwarven army to ask what was going on, and thus any misunderstandings would be resolved peacefully. Once that was secured, though, the dwarves would have two major problems. Both entrances to Khazad dûm were compromised. The west gate was destroyed by the Watcher in the water, and the bridge of Khazad dûm was destroyed by Gandalf during his battle with the Balrog. So the dwarves would have three options. One, either try to enter through the hidden tunnels that the orcs had used to get back in. Two, to return to the west gate, possibly kill the Watcher if it was still there, and clear out the rubble so that they could enter back into Khazad dûm that way. Or three, enter to the east gate and somehow rebuild the bridge, probably under fire if they did so. All three options were dangerous, but were possible. However, from there, it's the first war all over again. The orcs would probably be more numerous by this time, despite Sauron's defeat, because of how much time had passed. Or perhaps maybe they would have fallen into decline after defeat. But out of the way, a long series of battles is going to kick off. And with the dwarves now having the numerical and technical advantage, any open battles, such as in the halls and in open chambers, would go their way and would fall first to the dwarves. Then the deeper tunnels after that, with the dwarves hunting down any survivors or any other lingering strongholds that the orcs may be hiding. And then the side passages. And then finally, the roots of the mountain itself. Take no chances this time. And to be certain, this would not be a quick war. This is going to be a campaign. You're looking at probably a good 5 to 10 years of clearing, hunting, and sealing tunnels. But the result would be just as the appendices in Return of the King point out. A final and methodical extermination of the orcs of Moria and the return of Khazad dûm. The last war of the dwarves and orcs. And after that was done, now the real rebuilding would start. Not as exiles and not as wanderers, but now as the rightful heirs of Durin who have come back to their ancient home. Khazad dûm. This is the Miller Philosopher. Have a good day.